And I'm Steve Brule with Studio Brule, and we are live here on YouTube with Deepika Bhardwaj, a documentary filmmaker from India who has just released her new film, Martyrs of Marriage, which deals with the dowry law, number 498, and how it's abused and its misuses and the pain that it causes. Welcome, Deepika.
Thank you so much, Steve. Pleasure to be on the show.
Can you give me an overview of your film, what it's about, and how it's going?
Steve, the documentary is a feature-length film on misuse of IPC 498A, which is also known as the anti-dowry law in India. The film essentially documents the struggles and pains of those who have suffered at the hand of abuse of this provision. The misuse of IPC 498A has been commented upon by our judiciary, the highest courts in India, for a long, long time. But there was never a documentation of this issue, which has essentially costed a lot of lives in India. There are a lot of people who have suffered immensely because of the misuse of this law. So the documentary brings together stories of those who have suffered this misuse. Some of the stories where people could not take the pain of the abuse of this law and also the harassment that comes along with it, and they committed suicide. And also the perspectives of the men's rights activists in India, the women's rights activists on the opposition to this, the change in this law, and also our lawmakers and judges and social activists. So it's a documentation of why the law was brought into in the country in the first place, how the misuse started, the reasons of this misuse, and the repercussions that we are facing now because of the abuse of this law. It's been going on for a long, long time, and like I said, there have been very strong comments by our judiciary on the abuse of this law. But this film basically documents the entire discussion on misuse of 498A while bringing the human pain of people who have undergone the abuse of this law.
Well, can you give me some examples of what this law, the abuses that are made against using this law?
Sorry, could you repeat your question again, Steve?
Can you give me an example of the kinds of abuses that occur as a result of this law?
So if I could explain it in just one example, and this is to explain it in a very normal, generic term. Our courts gave a judgment recently in one of the cases where they acquitted a man who was accused in this criminal provision that basically accounts for 3 years of punishment if found guilty. And they said if the husband asks his wife not to use Facebook, it is not cruelty. So the woman had gone ahead and filed this criminal charge on her husband because he would object to her extreme use of social media. So, and this trial entails years and years of going through the criminal justice system. People get arrested. So what essentially happens is, because the law criminalizes cruelty, and it can be any sort of cruelty, physical or mental, and it's very difficult to judge what exactly entails mental cruelty. Several cases are filed in India in today's day and age, and it has been happening for a long, long time, that any reason of dispute between within a marriage is then given the color of a dowry demand or domestic violence or physical and mental cruelty, and the husband and his entire family gets implicated in this law, in this criminal charge, and then they have to go through the criminal trial for there's no end to the number of years that a family faces this criminal trial. It can take 5 years, it can take 10 years. There have been cases where people have been honorably acquitted after 15, 20 years of struggle. When I was screening my documentary in Hyderabad, and there was a lady who had come over there, and she encouraged everybody to fight, and she had fought for 15 years along with her brother. Like I said, any family member can be implicated in this law, from kids to aged parents to uncles, to aunts, to anybody living in other country, anybody living in absolutely different city. Anybody's name can be, added into the complaint, and then the criminal trial starts. So
Even a distant relative?
yeah, neighbors. There have
Could they
been
not?
cases where even neighbors
Neighbors.
have been, yes, even neighbors have been named because they intervened in the dispute, and they tried to sort of advise both husband and wife. And there was a man who walked into my Kolkata screening, and he faced the trial for 2.5 years, after which the charges against him were quashed. But yes, he was implicated because he just tried to make both of them understand, to settle it amicably, and his name was implicated, added into the case. And if I speak of some examples from the documentary, I've discussed cases where this law was used because the husband refused to part ways from his old parents, who were absolutely ill, and the wife did not want to stay with the parents. Or generally, she would say that she wants a nuclear family, and the husband was not willing to leave his parents. The case was filed. There's a case in my documentary where this man had arguments with his wife on the paternity of their child, and he eventually conducted a DNA test, and within 2 days of him conducting the DNA test with his son, he had a case filed against him, and he was put behind bars without any investigations, without any sort of evidence. And he spent a couple of days behind bars, and 15 days after that, he gets to know that he's not the father of the child. So there are cases like this. Then there's a case
What
where
was the charge for him?
that he demanded dowry, that he ill-treated his wife, that he was mentally and physically cruel to her. He indulged in domestic violence.
Is there
So
any proof required or evidence required for these things?
not really.
So any person, but mostly, is it mostly the women that make these charges?
Yes, it's a wife. It's a wife who can file these charges against the husband and the family.
Only the wife?
Yes, only the wife. So the
Okay.
law criminalizes cruelty only if it is a wife. Mental and physical cruelty within a relationship, only if you're a wife can you file a case against your husband and his relatives.
Now, from what you're saying, it sounds like this is extremely broad, that almost any reason or just no reason can be used successfully to bring a charge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are several and more cases today where, our society is changing. Extramarital relationships are everywhere. And this is also one of the major reasons. And I have interviewed a detective in the documentary who said that he gets around 150 cases every month. And a major reason that he cites behind these cases is adultery. So if the wife would be having an affair with somebody else, and if the husband objects, then to basically turn around the things in her favor, she would use this law and file a case against the husband. And he had several when I was interviewing.
Now, just let me be clear here. So she files a case against the husband because he objects to her affair.
Correct.
That's a little bit strange.
Yeah, I know it is. I know it is, but there are several and more cases where things like this has happened. I mean, the DNA case that I spoke to you about, it's the extreme case of adultery. I mean, here's a case where the child is not of the father, and then when he conducted the DNA test, the wife just went and filed the 498A on him, and he was arrested without any evidences.
So now it's pretty obvious that this is an unjust law. Why is it still in place?
So the documentary discusses this perspective quite at length, Steve. The women organizations in India have been extremely vociferous um, um, in absolutely denying that there's a misuse, and absolutely against any changes to the law. Like I said, our Supreme Court has come down heavily on the law several times. There are various high courts in India that have said that this law is being grossly abused, and it's being used for extortion as well.
Extortion. Is that
Yes,
what you said?
correct.
Extortion?
Yes, I've used the word extortion.
Okay.
I will discuss that in detail. In 2005, a Supreme Court of India equated the misuse of the law to legal terrorism, and they said the law was being abused, and there was no denial of the fact that there are several cases that have entered the system with absolutely different motives, and the issue was not dowry or domestic violence, but there have been filed for vengeance, or for vindication, for demanding money, and all of that. So there have been these comments made by our courts time and again, but the women organizations have been absolutely against any changes to the law. Our law commission has produced 2 reports on misuse of IPC 498A, and suggested that the law needs amendments because it is being misused. But in those reports, the views of the women organizations are that the law is, even if it is abused, it's a very, very minor percentage of misuse, and that can't be an excuse for getting away with or getting done with the law, because there's so much of harassment of women, and so they're just
This is
okay
the
with this
claim
sort of.
by the women's groups that
Correct.
the use is low.
Correct.
Now, just to be clear, when you say women's groups, is this equivalent to feminist groups in the West?
So we have dedicated organizations in India. There is a Ministry for Women and Child Development, which has the strongest say on these issues. Then we have a National Commission for Women. Then we have state commissions for women, which basically deal with the issues that women face. So essentially the voices of theirs, but yes, there are a lot of feminist groups as well.
So these groups you would say are not necessarily feminist groups, are they also feminist groups?
No, they're mostly feminist groups, but the government organizations cannot really be categorized into this, although they have feminists as a part of those organizations.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can equate that to the feminist opposition in the West. And when I said extortion, just to give you an example, in my documentary, I have used a real-life evidence of a conversation between a counsel, an advocate, and his client, where he is telling her how to rehearse the complaint that they have made against the husband, and she should basically feel that she's an actress, she's doing a role play, and she should rehearse those lines and behave as if she's a victimized woman, and only then would they be able to pressurize the family to part away with 30 lakhs or 50 lakhs of money, and this is like 3 million rupees or 5 million rupees. And I recently screened my documentary in Dubai, and there's a family who I met over there, and in their case, the daughter-in-law is asking for 15 crores. Now, I'm a little bad in conversions immediately, but that's a huge money. So the alimony, if I would say, or these amounts that would go to a woman in case of the marriage breakdown, is tagged at a very high price, because there's a criminal case against the husband and they're pressurized through. And 498 is not the only thing, Steve. The documentary gets into the depth of various laws that we have in India that are related to matrimonial relationship. 498 is one. Then the Domestic Violence Act is there, which essentially criminalizes, it's a quasi-criminal charge, but it recognizes domestic violence only against women. So there's no protection.
Just 1 second. This law 498A also deals with domestic violence.
Yes,
And then
correct.
there's another law to deal with the very same thing?
Absolutely, absolutely. 498A is a criminal provision, and Domestic Violence Act basically entails the recourses that a woman can seek from her husband if whether there's domestic violence or there's no domestic violence. So she can seek monetary compensation, she can seek residential compensation, she can seek protection orders against the husband. So these are the kind of recourses that the law provides, and usually these cases are filed together. So there'll be a 498A, which is a criminal charge in which the husband and his family can get arrested,
Could be
be
anything.
put behind bars. And then there's a domestic violence case, and there are several other cases also that get filed, which are cases for maintenance. So there are several charges that a husband and his family can face. And what's really troublesome in a lot of cases, which is extreme harassment, is these cases can be filed from the location of the wife. So if for the entire duration of their marriage they stayed in one city, when these situations arise, she can go back thousands of kilometers away and then file this charge, and the husband and his family would travel over there to basically face the criminal charge and other cases on them.
Now, how many of these cases are filed every year? Is there a large number?
498A, if I talk about 498A, the last, in 2015, there were about 1,13,000 cases that were filed.
13,000. Now,
no, it is 1,13,000.
One what?
1,13,000.
1 lakh. What is that?
Okay, so 100,000. Yeah, 100,000 and add on 13,000 to that.
113,000 cases.
Correct. Yes.
Ooh, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. And
that's a typical year?
Yeah. There were last year we had a number of cases coming down a bit, because in 2014 the Supreme Court of India passed an extremely strict judgment against abuse of this law, saying, giving very specific guidelines to prevent mechanical arrests under 498A. So
what kind of arrest?
Mechanical arrests, as in as soon as the complaint is made, they would just pick up the husband and
okay, so like automatic.
Yeah, correct. Automatic, correct. So to curb automatic.
So to be clear, before this, it used to be automatic. The wife goes to the police go get the man. Nothing you can do about it, just like that.
In a lot of cases. Yes, a husband can also file anticipatory bail if he's anticipating a case like that, and people are provided anticipatory bails, but the number of arrests are quite high. So in 2014, there were 122,000 cases that were filed, and for that there were 222 or 24,000 people who were arrested, out of which were 40,000 were women. So the number of people who get arrested under this law is quite high. And that's exactly what Supreme Court said, that the number of arrests are extremely high. The charge sheeting rate is extremely high. But the number of people who are found guilty, or the number of people who are convicted under this law, is abysmal. It's extremely low. So there's a lot of gap. And if I could share just briefly, these are just the number of cases which land up as the criminal charges, Steve. But
can you repeat that? I don't think I understood. Can you repeat that?
So 113,000, as I said, the number of cases that were filed in 2015.
Right.
If I may say, almost an equivalent amount of number of cases would go to women's cells. So we have a specific cell where women complaints are taken. These are specialized police stations. So a
Okay.
lot of cases go over there. And there are several cases in which the husband and his family is threatened that you give us the money and we will not file these charges on you.
Oh my God, this is terrible.
So a lot of people give up at that moment itself
Of course, of course.
because they don't want to go through the entire process, which is extremely one-sided anyways. So a lot of people give up at that moment, and these are
And
the number of official.
they just pay everything, and
Yeah, they just pay up.
this is not painting a very good picture of male-female relationships in India.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. A lot of families I have met in the last 4 years. There are several families where the elder son faced a situation like this, and the family is so scared to get their second son married, and they would say, if it's got to be like this, then we are better off not marrying our son. So there's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of what do I say? Absolute feeling of helplessness that the laws are extremely one-sided and you wouldn't be heard and stuff like that. And
Let me ask you
of
a
course,
quick,
slightest things can turn into these criminal charges. And
of course.
and
And
I met a woman, yeah, last night. I was coming back from Dubai, and she told me about a case of her friend who was undergoing a divorce, and she said she's been, undergoing the process for a long time. And I asked her, "What do you mean long time?" And she said, "It's been a year." And to be very honest, I laughed, because 1 year is nothing
sure.
in India. Not in India, in 1 year, nothing even begins.
Hmm.
There are people who have been facing these absolutely concocted cases, false cases, for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. Some of
Well,
these
I'll
people
tell
are
you
part of
from
my
my experience,
documentary.
these legal cases in family matters and whatnot go on for a long time everywhere. In my case, 11 years.
Wow, my
Yeah,
God.
in Canada. Although
Wow.
our laws aren't as draconian as you described. But I did want to make one quick point, Deepika. Maybe you could comment on this.
Yeah,
Um, you mentioned over 100,000 cases for the 498 dowry law, and
correct.
about the same amount of cases to go to the women's cell, which I
Correct.
understand is a special police station to deal
Correct.
specifically with complaints that women have against their husbands, I guess, right?
Correct. Correct. Yes.
So that's over 200, maybe 250,000 every year.
So I'll tell you
Now,
something, Steve. This data is not so 113,000 data that I gave you is data that is available in our national records. So that's data which is documented. Now, when I'm saying there are equal amount of cases that land up in these women's cells, this is the data that has been provided to me by specific police stations that I visited while making the documentary. And they said, in fact, I'm telling you double. They say it's almost twice. So they say of all the cases that land up to them at the women's cells, almost one third result into FIR. One third are where the husband and wife would reunite and they would compromise and then get back together, saying that, okay, we'll sort this out amongst ourselves and then move on with their lives and live together. And one third are cases where settlements happen at the women's cell. So so there are a lot of cases that land up
it's
at
a
the
lot
women's
of
cell.
cases. No matter which way you cut the numbers, it's a lot of cases. And
Correct.
in this case, for what you're describing, all of the power in the relationship is in the wife's hands.
Absolutely.
All of it. Which
Absolutely.
I do want to make one quick point about this is that when you view somebody takes an action publicly, probably this is just like to say the approximate probably 10, 20, 100 more incidents happen in the house in which the person threatens to go public, but then the person receiving the threat says, okay, I give you whatever you asked for, don't go to the police.
Yes.
So And we see this, I think, and this is power dynamics in relationships in general, I think, is that when someone has a power like that outside of the home, they often, I think, use it inside the home as a threat for
Absolutely,
power within the family.
absolutely.
Can you comment? Do you see this kind of dynamic in Indian families in which, say, a wife who maybe does not go to the police, but uses that power to control the family or the man?
I will tell you, I will answer you this with two instances that are discussed as a part of the documentary itself, Steve. There's a case that I've used, and it's an audio evidence where a wife is demanding an expensive perfume from her husband. And he says he can't afford such an expensive perfume. And she says, if you can't afford that expensive perfume, by the way, it was your responsibility to cater to all my needs. And if you can't cater to my needs, then you know what I'll do? I'll go to the police station and I'll say you have mentally and physically tortured me. I'll file a case of 498A on you, so you better pay up. And yes, it's an original conversation between a husband and wife. And
This
he
is
says,
really very terrible. It's very
and
depressing.
the second thing which I may share with you is a case that's there in the documentary where this husband, this man, had actually shifted to his wife's place. You know, in usual ways, it is the wife who shifts to the husband's family. In this case, it was the husband who shifted with his wife, because she said before marriage that you got to take care of my mother and me, shifting with us because we don't have any brother. So he agreed to that. He went through domestic violence. He was abused, he was ridiculed, and he was questioned on how much he earns and all of that. There was a lot of physical and emotional violence in the relationship. Now, this man was thrown out of that home by his wife, and he went to the cops and he said, can you please protect me? And they said, we have nothing for you, you know, so you can go back. And he went back. So he filed for divorce on grounds of cruelty, listing all the violence that he had gone through. Now his wife on that day, within 2 days of receiving these divorce summons, goes outside his family, creates a huge ruckus over there, demeans his entire family in front of the entire society, and creates such a huge ruckus. The police is called, they're dragged to the police station, and she says, you put them behind bars and I will file a dowry case on them and all of that. And this man gets to know, since he was not staying with his family, he took up a paying guest accommodation. He hanged himself at the paying guest accommodation on the same night. So this is the kind of equation we are talking about. So
I have to say that these women you described are evil and cruel.
they are, and
But there's so many, so many.
there
How
are so
is it
many.
there's so
Yes,
many?
yes, and people know this, Steve. I have, while screening my documentary, now we have covered around 10 cities. I've screened the documentary at judicial academies also. I've personally gone and met the high court judges. There are so many people who have so many cases to tell me after the documentary has been made. They tell me a lot more cases than I probably may know about, of these extreme sort of harassment and torture. And they also just say, well, there were judges sitting in one of the cities screening, and I asked them, why wouldn't you punish if somebody is making these false allegations? And the judges just said, we are bound by law. We are bound by law. So they know this is happening. They know that this kind of harassment is going on, but um, they just sound very helpless.
And are any politicians trying to do something about this? The
Yes,
politicians can change the law, right?
correct. There have been several discussions on this in not a lot, but there have been discussions on this in Indian Parliament. Of course, these issues are lowered down by the women MPs and the member of parliament who are females, and they say, well, there's so much of suffering of women, so what are you even talking about of misuse and all of that? And they say this is a narrative, this is a rhetoric, and we don't agree to this and all of that. But this has been discussed in a parliament, and very few parliamentarians have expressed their concern on this abuse. They have several times said that they want to change the law, but as such, there has not been any change or amendment in the law per se. Like I said, there have been guidelines issued. There have been some sort of self-sensitization in the police, that they would try to listen to the husband's side as well. But the law remains the same. So through the documentary, I'm trying to bring this, it is already known by the parliamentarians, but through the documentary, I'm trying to tell a very human story of this pain and suffering and of what people are going through. And it is not just men, it is women, it is the entire family who goes through a suffering like this. And they're fighting in the courts for years and years, and
It totally destroys the life. It
absolutely
totally
destroys
the
life. People lose their jobs, people lose their sanity. There are a lot of people, I wish to stress on this, there are a lot of people, in fact, these are people who are now helping others. These are these people are a part of the men's rights movement. They are leaders of the men's rights movement. They have fought their cases, given a really tough fight, and won their cases, and now they are helping other people as well. But the entire process is not very easy. It's very difficult. So our parliamentarians know about this. Through the documentary, I'm trying to tell people these stories of extreme harassment of families, so that at least the lawmakers look at this as a human issue, and
Of course,
try and bring some sort of relief, because it's just become so one-sided.
Deepika, you mentioned that the feminist politicians want to keep this law. They say there's a lot of suffering for women at the hands of men. Is this true, or is this exaggerated?
Well, there are a lot of cases which are reported every year, Steve. Now, feminists do not even want to think that a woman would, try and file this case because of vengeance or because of extorting money. They say a woman would never file a case like that. It is only when she would go through extreme form of harassment that she would go and file a case against her husband or the family. They would never. So there are these stereotypes that they actually have about women on which they play all the time.
The same thing happens here too, that the women always do only good things, never bad things, right?
Correct, absolutely. And one of the feminists who I interviewed in the documentary, although that part of her interview is not there in the film, but I asked her this question that if you would, in fact, to all the viewers who are listening to this, I've documented so many cases where people went through extreme form of harassment and committed suicide because of this harassment and torture. Men, women, their sisters, mothers, fathers, and everybody. And there are several and more cases like that. So I asked this question to this feminist, and I said, ma'am, there are people who are ending lives. This is not just about numbers, because they always bring it to numbers. They would say, oh, how many men suffer, So I tell them it is not about numbers. Even if it would be one woman suffering because of a certain gender issue, you would want to have a law to criminalize that thing. And now you say we need to have, a lot of numbers to even think about it. So I asked her that people are taking lives. So why are you so against any changes in this law? And she said, oh, well, people, these men, they are undergoing depression and nobody takes care of them. So they're so blatant. They are so on your face in absolute rejection. And if somebody says something like that for a woman, even if she committed suicide because of depression, they would be like, how dare you, So
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
not
The same
deny,
attitude
Steve, that
here.
I would not deny that there are genuine cases of harassment. there are genuine cases of torture. There are genuine cases of domestic violence. But I don't know how much of recourse has the law brought to these people when I see so much of misuse around me. So, and this is the perspective that is shared by people who are sitting in the courts as well. I've had conversations, like I said, with the judges, and what they tell me, and what a lot of people otherwise tell me, and I have experienced this while sitting in the police stations. These cases where there would be extreme form of torture, and you can see it in front of you. They would try and tell the woman, don't file a case, just go back and deal with it. Or so a lot of these cases do not actually turn up in the courts, while these cases which are filed for malicious intentions land up in the court. There are extreme high demands being made to settle these cases, and the
So
lawyers.
in other words, the law is helping malicious women punish men, and
Absolutely.
it is not helping women who have legitimate problems in their relationships.
Yes, absolutely. There are, you could say that, absolutely.
It sounds like a bad situation, Deepika.
Yes, it is a bad situation in India, and the men's rights movement over here has been raising a voice against this issue for a long time. And they have the good thing is that the new laws that are coming, they have raised a very strong battle against passing of new laws, which also were coming without any discussions and extremely one-sided. And we have been able to, the men's rights activists have been able to sort of make people aware that these kind of legislations are coming without any discussion on them and extremely one-sided. So they've been able to hold on to few laws that could have otherwise come, just like 498A, without any discussions. So it is definitely a bad situation, but because of now a lot of awareness on this, not a lot of, I would say, but a decent amount of awareness on this, because of social media, because of people connecting with others who are going through situations like this, there is help available. And there's an organization called Save Indian Family in India that is leading this entire conversation, and there are activists as a part of this movement, and they have different chapters where they hold it's very, I think it's very innovative. I don't think anything like this happens around anywhere in the world, where you have a local ground support in terms of meetings with these people who can advise you, who can guide you, who can empathize with you, who can hear you, and give you a shoulder of support and tell you that you can fight back. So a lot of people go to these meetings, get in touch with the leaders of this movement or the counselors in this movement, and seek help and then fight back. So there are a lot of people who are fighting back, but yes, the situation is bad.
It sounds like it's destroying family life, and a lot of these kinds of laws in the West are destroying families, encouraging people to fight instead of repair their relationships.
Absolutely. When a small thing like
Perfume.
excessive amount of usage of social media can land up to a criminal trial.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a lot of there's a lot of corruption because of this law. The police would not listen to you if you wouldn't bribe them. There are lawyers who are making good amount of money by this. They have a cut from the settlement money that would come. So there's so much of corruption because of this, and it's been 33 years, 34 years. The law came in 1983. And it's been going on for so long. I mean, I think my documentary is just a drop in this ocean of what people have gone through. People have lost their lives savings. People have lost their lives. People have lost absolute trust in relationships, and there's so much that this law has caused.
Deepika, where can people see your film?
That's a very interesting question, Steve. As of now, I'm holding public screenings because the best way to tell people about this issue is to engage with them. Although the documentary brings out all these perspectives that I shared with you, and there are some stories that would, that would make you think really hard on what is this law really doing. And but as of now, I'm doing public screenings and engaging with people. For another a month or so, I will have these public screenings. And after that, we should have the documentary available on an online platform. But as of now, it's not there on any online platform. But they can stay tuned to all the updates on the documentary on our Facebook page. There's a website, www.martyrsofmarriage.com, where we keep updating about our upcoming screenings. Like I said, as soon as it would be either available on a DVD or online platform, that information would also be shared with people. And I'm also seeking help from people to allow me to take the documentary to as far and wide as possible. We recently did Dubai. I hope I'll be able to take the documentary to a few more countries as well to have a conversation around this, because I think people around the world should know what's happening in India.
Can it be filmed? Can it be shown in Canada or the US? Do you have a mechanism to do that?
Oh yes, if somebody wants to screen it, yes, absolutely. If somebody wants to screen it, they can get in touch with me. I'm available on martyrsofmarriage@gmail.com. They can reach out to me on Facebook or on Twitter, and I can definitely work along with them to have the screening done. In fact, there's someone who has reached out to me from Canada, and I will be discussing how best we can get the documentary over there.
Terrific. I would like to see it myself.
I
might
sure.
be going to India next year, so if nothing else, I'll maybe able to see it in India then, right?
I'm sure you would be able to catch the documentary much before than that, Steve. Yeah. And let's see, what's another positive thing that has happened after the documentary is there's now a lot of interest in the mainstream cinema people as well. So a lot of people, yeah. So a lot of people from Bollywood have seen the documentary, and a very renowned director personally wrote absolutely amazing things about the documentary and how powerful it is. So let's see. I hope someday we would have this issue on a very huge canvas, and people would get to know about this reality.
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about India here in the West, in part because I think the media portrays men in India very poorly.
Correct, absolutely.
I know quite a few men from India, and very good men, very good people.
Well, yes. Over here, with the whole movement now around laws, and since I'm sure you would have known about the 2012 gang rape case, after that there's a lot of conversation on our laws and suffering of women, and these cases of extreme harassment of women. So the media also focuses on these cases, and when it's the other side of the story, they usually try and just shut themselves off.
They don't show it at all. They don't show it at all.
Yes, I was working as a journalist, and the reason I started, I initially thought of making the documentary was essentially because I also never knew something like this happens. So from the media's perspective, there's very little interest by mainstream media channels in India who would want to do these kind of stories. So whenever a story would break, they would go and report on the story only from one side and paint the man guilty and sort of convict him in public eye. But when the trial happens and when the case is looked at in its extreme depth, and when the reality is out that, you know, whatever was alleged was not really the truth, and the person gets acquitted, honorably acquitted, and it is concluded that the case was filed with you know, malicious intentions, the media wouldn't cover those cases. The media
Exactly.
has no
The
sympathy
same
for
thing
those
happened here
cases.
too. Exactly the same in the West. In
Exactly.
fact, I will say it this way: is that, and in the West, I don't know if you're familiar with this part of it, but the mainstream media credibility is very low and going
I know.
lower every day here, to the point
Correct.
where a lot of people don't believe the mainstream media. In part, and a big reason is because exactly what you're describing, and
Correct.
it's a kind of lie by omission. So
Yes,
they focus,
absolutely.
and the media in the West, I don't know if it's the same in India, it's totally dominated by feminists,
I'll tell you,
pretty much.
I'll quickly tell you about a case that I investigated, Steve, and it made international headlines, by the way. All the international medias covered this case, and they call these two girls who beat up boys with belts and extremely badly inside of a bus, saying that they molested them and that's why they were beating them. It became an international story. These girls were hailed as brave hearts
I
who beat.
remember this. I remember
Yeah,
this
you
case.
remember we have had a conversation about this, right? So those boys have been acquitted by the court. They have been discharged by the court because every single witness who was in the bus supported the boys, not supported the boys, supported the truth that there was no molestation. It was a fight over seats, and these girls beat up those boys and then video shot them, and they had done that with several other people before. And I had made two videos on this story, and those videos actually went viral. And now when these boys have been discharged by the court, um, all these national extremely popular channels don't have a discussion on it.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing at
No
all.
follow-up.
These boys were not able to give their exams, and they wanted to join army, and they have cleared the tests. They wanted to join army and they had to give an exam for which they were not allowed to sit because there was so much of media exposure on this case, and the army said we would not allow these guys to give exams.
So this is
And
the
now
case where some young women, for out of malicious anger, completely destroy the lives of two young men, and there's
yes.
nothing can be done about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember I was sitting on this TV debate, and I challenged this anchor, who's a very famous anchor. His name is Arnab Goswami. And I told him, he said, you keep talking about this case all the time. I said, I keep talking about this case because in this case, there's a glaring example where injustice has been done. And I am asking you, once this case gets to a closure, would you do a story on it? And he said he would do a story on it, but there's no story on it.
There's no story. No,
No.
that, yeah, there's not going to be a story because if it's anything like here in the West, it's if they have a narrative, the narrative is that men are bad and they treat women bad, and they always stick to this narrative, and they don't want to undermine that narrative.
Correct, absolutely. You know, any case of suicide by a woman would, if it happens in cities, in metro cities, and if the husband is accused and it's alleged that there was harassment or domestic violence, you know, the papers, the newspapers would cover it, the TV media would cover it. But there's so many people in the men's rights movement who keep sharing these news articles that come essentially in the regional papers, where so many men are committing suicide because of harassment like this. But it wouldn't make a national story.
No.
Never. No matter how excruciatingly sad the case is, it would not make a national story, because a friend of mine who works in media told me that these cases don't get them TRPs. So
They don't get them what?
the ratings.
The ratings. Ah,
Yes.
so sad stories about women get ratings, sad stories about men make the ratings fall.
Yeah, they don't get public sympathy, or they don't get people's attention, maybe.
And so then there's no advertising and less money.
Maybe, yes, of course. It
It's
eventually
always
boils
about
down.
money in the end, right?
Yes, it's all about money in the end, correct. And
Mm.
that's why a lot of people a lot of people don't like what I'm doing because it might hurt their business, right? So
Might hurt their profits. That's right. Yes.
absolutely.
Tough work there, Deepika.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm
Very good work.
just trying to
What?
bring
Sorry?
and this is just the beginning, Steve. Like I said, this is just a drop in the ocean. I recently, when I was screening my documentary in Pune, and we had an extremely amazing response over there also. In an auditorium of 500 people, we had about 650 people watching the documentary. And one of the persons who came to see the film was an old man who had been victim of a false molestation case. He fought the case for 8 years, 8 long years. His innocence proved one level after the other level after the other level. He went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he was acquitted and he was found innocent. And then he started the case against the woman for compensation and defamation. And he was recently awarded a very tiny amount of compensation. This story should should be told to everybody, because he was suspended from his job at the fag end of his career. He was put through this harassment, and he lost almost everything. His family stood by him, and he did fight the case very hard, and he came out clear of all the charges. But the amount of suffering that he went through, I am surprised that nobody in the media would want to know his story or tell his story to the world. So I recently interviewed him, and I would be sharing that interview with people. So this is just the beginning, Steve. I'm trying to bring the injustice that men are facing in India through the stories, through these video stories that I'm telling people. And the whole idea is to make people understand that it's not just one side that suffers. There's a lot of suffering on the other side, and we need to empathize with it. We need to understand it, and we need to find solutions for this as well.
And Deepika, here in the West, you're familiar with Cassie Jaye and her film, The Red Pill. She experienced a lot of trouble as soon as her funders determined that she was sympathetic to these issues. Have you had problem with funding or with people maybe opposing your work because of you're sympathetic to issues affecting men?
When I started in the beginning, Steve, I did approach a few people to fund my documentary, and they did not accept my proposal. And then I decided to make it myself. So I pitched in my own savings into this. Then I also raised crowd funds as a part of while I was shooting the documentary, and there were some really kind souls who did contribute to the crowd fund. So yes, there have been hardships in terms of finding funders for this documentary, but I think Cassie had, in my case, it's not like Cassie, because I think Cassie had people who were funding her initially. They were thinking that she's going to make a documentary which is going to be putting down the men's rights movement.
Exactly.
So I think that, right? Yeah. So they had they had an interest in funding her because they wanted a certain specific kind of a documentary made, and they wanted to have a say in it. It was not exactly that with me, but it was more to do with people not really understanding that what is happening. They were not aware of this issue. They were not, they had not heard about it, and they thought that this can't be a mainstream documentary. So they did not find any motive of funding it as such. And they wanted to, of course, have a say in how I will make the documentary. And I did not want that to happen. So I did not want any compromise with the content of the documentary. So I decided to do it myself. Now, in the screening of the documentary, again, I have gone the crowdfunding way. And there have been several people who have pitched into my crowd fund to make these screenings possible, because the documentary scene in India is quite different. we don't really have a very conducive atmosphere for documentaries. We don't have, standard format where you could just screen it, you could put tickets on it, and then people would come and then buy the tickets and watch a documentary. There are very few documentaries, and documentaries that have been made with high budgets or very high or very established production companies that have got a theatrical release. So I did face few troubles, but then I think there have been a lot of people who have supported my effort, and I've been in this space for 4 years, so they trust me, they have supported me, and like I said, now the screenings that I'm doing are also crowdfunded. So, but not something that Cassie has went through. I think she faced a really tough time
It
in
was
terms of.
tough for her. I mean, she's getting some positive recognition and a lot of negative pushback too.
Correct.
So
I've seen that.
it's an interesting journey to watch just how it develops.
I am so keen to watch The Red Pill. Now I think it's available online as well. So another friend of mine who saw Martyrs of Marriage recently said, you have to watch The Red Pill. And, there's so much of resonance in both the works. And but what's different between me and Cassie is Cassie had made these documentaries on focusing on women's issues, and she had a name for herself in this space. I was working as a journalist, and something very personal happened to me, and I decided to make this film. So it was a lot of personal motivation to do this. Cassie had a name with the people who actually backtracked, so that shows their intentions. So
Yeah.
they don't want the truth to be out there.
They
just
don't
want the propaganda to be made.
They don't want the truth.
It's so strange, and I hats off to Cassie that she stood by what was essential and important to be told, and she's faced all of this herself, and I'm so looking forward to watch that documentary. And it's quite
I would
coincidental
like
that
to see you and
she
Cassie.
started at the same time, and I started at the same time. We almost finished at the same time. And I'm very happy for the response. I think there's a lot of positive response that The Red Pill has got. And I'm so happy for Cassie and for everybody who is a part of the documentary and the entire men's rights movement over there that has been documented through the film. I'm so glad that it's opening up conversations that could not have been possible, because I think a film has a very deep impact on the minds of people, and it makes people think in an absolutely different way than any other medium can. So when I also started, I thought a documentary and telling these real life stories is the best way to tell people about this problem.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your film, and I was hoping to see you and Cassie discuss your experiences together, to see the parallels and the differences of your experiences in making two films which are closely related in theme.
Yeah. Well, the documentary Martyrs of Marriage is essentially an issue-based film. Cassie has documented the entire men's rights movement. There's a very, very active men's rights movement in India as well.
Yes, I've met several of them, yeah.
Yes, I could not document a lot of it. In fact, the documentary essentially focuses only on the issue. So the men's rights movement in India should also have a documentary like The Red Pill, which can discuss the issues that Indian men are facing right now.
Maybe we can talk about that, Deepika.
Sorry?
Maybe we should talk about that, the documenting of the men's rights movement in India.
Somebody should do it. Maybe I will do it. But this space definitely needs a lot of exposure, because there are a lot of people who have dedicated their lives to it. And in India, there's very little government support. For example, in UK, in UK, there are members of parliaments who are now coming forward and talking about men's issues.
I think only one so far.
Yeah, Philip Davis, right?
Philip Davis, yeah.
Yeah. So, but in India, I think it'll take years and years for somebody to take a stand like that. And talk openly about this, but maybe these are little steps that people are this documentary serves as a little step to talk about these issues. I'm sure there would be a lot of people. I get contacted by a lot of youngsters now, Steve, and I'm really happy about that. There are youngsters who are in the law domain, in the legal domain, the youngsters who are in the creative domain, who reach out to me and say that they also want to do something on this. They're looking at it happening around them. They want to do something about this. So I'm sure these are little tiny steps. There will be a lot of awareness. There will be a lot of people who would understand the importance of this issue and working on this issue. And I'm sure there would be a lot of people who would start talking about this once they understand that this is important to be spoken about as well.
So Deepika, is it too early to ask you what your next project is?
Okay, there are a lot of things in mind right now, Steve. While making Martyrs of Marriage, one thing that I definitely realized is that the day and age, the demand of the day and age is very quick deliverables. People want a very quick turnout. It took me 4 years to make Martyrs of Marriage. That's a long time. So people are looking at content which is quick and they can absorb and they can watch it, and it's frequent. They have a continuous, things like that coming to them. So there are a couple of things that I'm thinking on. There are thoughts to make a web series on talking about, because Martyrs of Marriage focuses on the issue. There are a lot of people who have, like I said, fought these cases, gave a really tough battle. So there are these inspiring stories that I really want to talk about in these web series. And these are journeys which are too long to be packed together in just one documentary. So, focusing on these individual stories and how they fought and how they came out, what was their experience, and their journeys and their battle and all of that. So documenting these through web series is one idea that is there in my mind. Let's see if I will be able to achieve that or not. Now there is the issue that is now increasingly affecting a lot of men, and in a lot of cases families as well, because there is implication of other family members, which is also happening, is rape cases. So in India there is so if the relationship goes sour, there are cases that we are seeing now that the girlfriend would file a case of rape on the boyfriend and say he raped me on false promise of marriage, whether there was any promise or not, whether they stayed together for 4 years, 5 years in a live-in relationship.
Deepika, I have to say, this charge of false promise of marriage is the most strangest thing to me to see. A relationship and then false promise of marriage.
I should surprise you more, Steve.
Okay.
There are about 8,000 cases. 8,000 such cases that were filed in India in year 2015. So we are not talking about a small number. We are talking about a huge number.
Yeah.
And what makes a rape charge extremely horrible is that you are behind bars for months, years maybe, before you even come to the stage of trial. And your innocence doesn't matter. Even if you have evidences, it doesn't matter. And if the media has pounced upon your case by any chance, you're behind bars.
Wasn't there a man who was dragged out and beat to death by a crowd on a false charge of rape recently?
Yes.
Or not recently, a year or two ago?
Not recently. I think it was 2 years ago. Yes.
Totally brutal murder of this man.
It was a lynching. That case has not yet. So when it happened, there was a lot of discussion around that case on what was the case, because
But didn't it turn out that the woman was lying?
No, they have not been. No, the case hasn't reached its conclusion as of now. Officially,
it has not?
No, it has not. Officially, it has not reached a conclusion. The man is anyways dead right now. But at that time, there were a lot of investigations that, or a lot of facts of the case that came out, and there were some CCTV footages that had come out where the woman was happily walking with this man inside of a hotel, and she was related to this man. She was his sister-in-law, and so there were a lot of layers to the case that that people did not discuss. And he
Can
was
you update us on this case when it's completed?
Sorry?
Can you give us an update on this case when
Sure,
it's completed?
absolutely. Sure, absolutely. There was a lot of when it happened, I really wanted to go over there and cover the story and look at the case in depth and bring out the evidences that were there, bring out these footages that were there. But there were a lot of people who warned me against it because there was a lot of caste this thing that had played out in this case. So it essentially, I think, became a battle between two communities, and there was a lot of tension in that space in that area because of this case. So people said it would not be safe for you to travel over there and cover the story at that moment. Yeah, but yes, if whenever the case comes to a conclusion, I hope it does come to a conclusion. But because the case became extremely political, and like I said, it had community involvement, I don't know if it would reach a conclusion ever, because the man is dead. And if they would bring out the reality of the case, and if it is not supporting the woman's version, I think there'll be a lot of tension again. So a lot of people so a lot of people would have interest in just hushing up the case.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But there are a lot of other cases that I intend to cover, Steve, and I hope to keep making these reports, investigative reports.
Have you got a YouTube channel, Deepika, for these web series and cases updates that you're going to do?
It would be my channel only, Steve. I am on YouTube with my name. My channel is Deepika Narayan Bhardwaj. It's the tag is Djourno Deepika. And but I'm very.
Can you send me that link later? I don't think I can know how to spell all of that.
Sure, I will certainly. This Rohtak sisters case that I told you about, these two women who beat up the boys in the bus. Those stories are there on the channel, and they got quite a good they got quite a good response at that time. But I intend to work in this space more and more, Steve, and I hope I can go long into this. Like you said, there's funding is always a problem, but I hope I'll get it through.
Well, it's important work, and Deepika, I want to thank you very much for talking to me. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we sign off today?
Well, there just two things. Anybody who would want to screen Martyrs of Marriage across the world can please reach out to me. I shall see if I can get the documentary to that country, and I'll ensure that I get the documentary over there so that a screening can be organized. And over here, please stay tuned. If you're in India, you can please stay tuned to different screenings that we're having. The next screenings that we have lined up are in the city that I reside, in Gurgaon. We have one that we are trying to organize in Jaipur. So there would be a couple of screenings before we put a curtain down on the public screenings in India as well. And in case you wish to contribute to my efforts, I run a crowdfund on Milap. There's a website called Milap, and the crowdfund is called Taking Martyrs of Marriage to Masses. So if you wish to contribute, anybody can contribute to that fund.
Well, I'll get the links for all of these things from you, and I can put them into the description of this video.
Sure.
Maybe that will help, I hope.
Sure, I hope so. And my message to everybody who gets into a situation like that is, please reach out to people who are there to help you and support you. There are a lot of activists in the men's rights movement who are now there to help out people, to listen to their problems and address those problems as much as they can. So don't give up. Well,
thank you again, Deepika. And I definitely would like to have this film screened in in Canada, hopefully in my hometown. So we'll after we're off the air here, we'll talk for a bit. Maybe you can tell me who it is that might be screening it, or maybe I can help out with getting a screening here at myself.
Sure, absolutely, Steve. Not a problem at all.
And let's not wait so long to talk again. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Absolutely. Pleasure talking to you, Steve, and thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you, and thanks for viewers for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you get a chance to see the Martyrs of Marriage and the web series coming soon from Deepika Bhardwaj in India.
Thank you, Steve. Bye.
Bye-bye.